Welcome back to the Constitution series, sponsored by MyStraightTalk.com. Today we're going to take a look at the real catalyst that sparked the move to independence during the American Revolution. As I spoke of in the last segment of this series, taxation was important. Taxation did start the American Revolution, and that did begin in about 1764, 1765, with the Stamp Act, followed by the Tea Act, followed by many other things. But then it really took a critical turn for the worse for England in 1774 with the passage of the Coercive Act. The King and the Parliament were now becoming very afraid of the American colonists. And the Coercive Acts did a number of things, but primarily the most important part was it allowed for and called for the confiscation of gunpowder and firearms from the American colonists. We also learned that the American Revolution began to be an armed conflict on April 19th, 1775, with the battles of Lexington and Concord. Now, what were the British troops sent to Lexington and Concord to accomplish? They were sent to Lexington and Concord for two purposes. One, to arrest John Adams and Samuel Adams, the leaders of the Sons of Liberty, and two, to confiscate the gunpowder and firearms of the colonists in those two cities. Now, the British governor of Massachusetts had already confiscated large numbers and large amounts of gunpowder and firearms, but this was the first time that he actually sent troops, and they were resisted by the colonists. Imagine that. Citizens of a free nation, guaranteed by their Constitution, guaranteed by the Bill of Rights of England from 1689 to be able to own and possess firearms, were now in danger of the government confiscating their firearms. And they had the most advanced firearms of the day. Well, we might call them assault rifles. But they were muskets, and even some had started developing a rifled musket. So the armed conflict called the American Revolution began on April 19th, 1775. But as yet, it was not a colony-wide war for independence from England. That's a very important thing to note. The colonists were not seeking independence from Britain in April of 1775. In fact, they didn't seek independence or declare independence from the British until July 2nd of 1776. Now, you might remember July 2nd more in line with July the 4th. Well, that's because on July 2nd, the Continental Congress approved the Declaration of Independence, but it was not published until the 4th of July. Thus, the 4th of July became the official Independence Day for the United States of America. So, between April of 1775 and July of 1776, it was not a war of independence. Critical point for you to remember. What drove the colonies to independence? A large number of the colonies were holding out on going for independence because Virginia, the largest colony and also the richest colony of the day, was not in favor of independence. Because of its size and its influence, it was not moving toward independence. It also had some very close ties with England. But then, a very critical thing happened. in April of 1776. This incident would later become called the Williamsburg Gunpowder Incident. On April 22nd of 1776, somewhere around there, someplace in April of 1776, the British governor of Virginia, whose residence was in Williamsburg, Virginia, which I have visited on a couple of occasions, an exact replica of the governor's mansion. In April of 1776, the British governor sent a detachment of Royal Navy sailors to the magazine in Williamsburg, Virginia, in the middle of the night, between 4 and 5 in the morning. What did they do? They confiscated the gunpowder, all of the gunpowder from the public magazine in Williamsburg. They confiscated it and took possession of it, thus stripping the citizens of their power to fight against a tyrannical regime. Now, this was a public magazine. I've also visited the replica of the magazine in Williamsburg. Very impressive. But now the citizens had effectively been disarmed. They only had what gunpowder they had in their homes. This was the incident that sparked Virginia in favor of independence. Confiscation, guns rights, right to bear arms, self-defense. Those were the catalysts which drove American independence. In May of that year, 1776, Virginia's House of Burgess went in favor of independence. And shortly thereafter, the remaining colonies all voted in favor of independence, sending their delegates to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia, where the Declaration of Independence was passed, and America declared its independence from the King of England and from Parliament. So it's very important to understand the British, from about the 1770s on, were very intent on confiscating firearms, gunpowder, and the right of the citizens to defend themselves. And the citizens stood up and fought against it and kept their right of self-defense. It led to a long and bloody war. But eventually the Americans would win and keep their right to bear arms, contrary to the desires and the will of the King of England. So when somebody tells you today that the American Revolution was all about taxes, or even taxes without representation, which is more correct, you can now tell them the primary reason for independence was the right to bear arms. If it hadn't have been for illegal and authoritarian confiscation of firearms and gunpowder by the British government, America would not have sought its independence. It would have only sought to stay British colonies, remain British colonies. And we might be speaking a different language today, and the Queen might be our Queen Mother. So, there you have it. Tomorrow we're going to take another look at some more things from this period of time and the ramp up, the immediate ramp up of the period right prior to and during the early Revolutionary War. Again, this series, the Constitutionist series, is sponsored by mystraighttalk.com. That's all one word, mystraighttalk.com. You can comment there on YouTube, or I would prefer you send me emails. My email address is David, spelled just like it sounds, spelled like every other David in the world, David at mystraighttalk.com. Please send me your comments. Please send me your questions. I would love to record a new video answering your question about the American Revolution and the Constitution. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and have a great day.